the work of an Iowa-based organization, Bailing Out Benji, kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing Out Benji regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing Out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing Out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing Out Benji.
I will use my voice because they don't have one, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. I'm Mindy, and I'm sitting here with Alexis and Kristen today, and we are going to dive into what we believe is the purest and truest example of a puppy mill that there could possibly be out there.
Yeah.
As we've talked through this podcast and with people, like we always say, everyone has their own definition of puppy mills and yada yada. Well, this facility is notorious for not only how he treats his animals, but where he is selling them, because they're being sold absolutely everywhere.
Yes.
So, of course, if you're tuning in, you probably know by now we're talking about Steve Kruse of Stonehenge Kennels in Iowa. He's come up very, very frequently in our show just because of how many tentacles he has in this space. So
Yeah. And he's kind of been like a bane of our existence as an organization, because we've tried from our efforts to also do something about him, like filing complaints against him, filing a complaint with the attorney general and the county sheriff. So like, it's personal. It's personal for you. It's personal for me.
Just,
like it's
one of those things where, like, I think, Kristen, you walked into this space and you were like, why do you keep talking about this man?
Yeah.
And it's like, he's just involved in everything. Like, we're going to talk about it. But the Daniel Gingrich case, he's, he was involved in that heavily. He wasn't held accountable by any means,
No.
but there are some of the worst cases we've seen in this country.
Yeah.
And they're all directly tied to him in some way.
He's got his fingers on a lot of stuff that we've seen. So
yeah, so today we were excited. We walked into our office, and first of all, most people realize by now we don't record and release the same day. So we are recording these episodes and releasing them like 3 to 4 weeks after the fact. But today we checked our USDA database and found out that Steve canceled his license.
Yeah.
Which is cause for celebration.
It's cause for celebration, but also hesitancy, because you're like, well, canceled license. Well, this can mean lots of things. And we discussed it in our Facebook post if anybody saw it, but a canceled license sometimes does mean that, someone's going out of business. They're no longer in the breeding business. But also, as we've seen, and why we do continue to track canceled license even after they get canceled, is because they can come back. They can come back under a new license. It could be passed to a family member that maybe is at the same property and address we've seen this person have a license at. So there's different ways. Like, this could mean he's out of business and cause for celebration there, but it could also mean it might just be changing. His business strategy might be changing.
Trying to hide from his violations. And, continue to sell the same outlets that he's selling through.
Yes, yeah. So while we are excited in this moment, we are still watching and waiting to see what happens. And so that just takes time, and we'll continue to monitor his licensing. And that's something that we do pretty much every day, every month. We're always on the USDA website. So if anybody's going to know, it's going to be us, because we are monitoring the USDA website very closely.
I was going to ask, how will we know? So, like, obviously, if he applies for another license under his name, like, that's going to be obvious. But what I know, and what I'm sure we'll talk about, is that he is very adept at staying under the radar.
Yeah.
And so are we watching for things like that his physical location? Does another license pop up there? Or like, how would we know if there was another license that was him, but not him?
Yeah, and that's usually how, like, if I was looking at someone who canceled their USDA license, I'm like looking up the city and state, and I'm looking through all the licensees in that city. looking at the new ones and saying like, oh, this address matches this one. Oh, their USDA number changed or their customer ID number changed, but that's still the same location or a similar kennel name, or that breeder's name is exactly the same. And so we make the connections that way. Is like the information is still the same, but you have a different number. And if people just look up that one USDA number, they're going to get that clean slate. They're not going to get the whole history because they don't exactly know to maybe look at the city and see all of the previous licenses, or look up that customer ID number and see all of his previous license numbers. So
presumably he's in rural Iowa, right? So like, what are the odds that, oh, look, a new breeder has just popped up in the exact same area?
Exact same address.
Yes.
And is it is that one of the reasons why people would, setting this guy aside, if any other breeder would cancel their license and get a new license, is because now I'm counting on, oh, search my license, squeaky clean.
Yes.
So I'm leaving that past behind.
Yeah. That's a fun thing too about like looking at the USDA website so closely, is like we see someone get maybe like a critical or a direct violation, and then they get a cancel, and then they get a new license, and we're like, well, that's probably
You
correlated.
might have fooled someone, but you're not fooling us.
No.
Like,
yeah.
and the way we keep our data, like, we can tell immediately, like if we were going to put a new licensee in there, you can tell there's an address or an old license at that address.
Yeah.
And the USDA is just cool with that.
There's no rules.
There's nothing in place to keep someone from. Interesting.
At one point, like 2 or 3 years ago, the USDA was encouraging them, or we believe they were encouraging them. They were making it easy for a bunch of breeders in Indiana to use the same P.O. box. Yeah. It looked like they had 20 licensees in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And because of the way we keep our data, because we know who owns these facilities, we were able to actually determine who they were before they changed their license and started using a P.O. box. But this whole industry has been set up to keep secrets from the public, and all of it is under the guise of, whether it's misguided or not, protection of the breeders, right? So in the case of using P.O. boxes, you don't want your private address out there. There are a lot of reasons why you might not want to put information out there, but it makes it extremely easy for these places to cancel a license and then pretend there's someone completely different business.
But then very hard for the public to get transparency about the prospective breeder that they might be getting a puppy from.
And back to the tentacles we have in the ground. So when you're saying like, well, how are you going to know? Well, when our rescue friends start getting calls to go to a property to take animals off, like we knew. So we'll backtrack this a little bit. And 2 years ago, I think it was 2023.
Yes, 2023.
Steve had gotten another suspension for his atrocious violations and how he keeps his animals. He was not allowed to do any business at that time. Well, we saw that there was a dog auction that weekend, and Steve Kruse's name, his name was on a lot of dogs that were being sold. And we raised the alarm. We filed a complaint with the USDA. Like, we wanted to figure out, like, why is he allowed to do this while he's under suspension? Like, not okay. Well, someone tipped him off. Well, we posted it. We posted about it the minute. But the funny thing, we tipped him off. But it didn't matter because the complaints were filed. The proof was already like in hand. You don't want to speak too soon when you know things, but also sometimes it's good for them to know how quickly we know things. And I think that should be a scary thing sometimes for some of these bad actors.
We're always watching.
We're always watching. But yeah, so we saw the catalog online. Rosie and Alexis went down to Southwest Auction in Missouri. And by the time they got down there, the catalog had switched. And it was no longer Steve's name selling the dogs. It was his nephew's name, who has a different USDA license. And so it said Dakota Moeller is selling these puppies instead of Steve. And then when we got a USDA FOIA, which gave us a ton of information about how Steve operates, we were able to see that the auction house signed an affidavit saying, well, no, it was never Steve's dogs. That was just a typo. And all of this stuff. So like every step of the way, we're just seeing how the industry protects itself. And it's frustrating.
It is. Yeah. That instance specifically, it was like, it was his name, and then we got there, and then it was another name, but it was the exact same dogs with the exact same descriptions because they
microchip
described
numbers,
literally.
We were able to compare the two.
And like, oh, all of a sudden you'd already sold those dogs, and they were already going to be his. Well, why wasn't his name on there first? Why was it your name? Like, yeah, it's definitely frustrating to be like, well, we have this evidence, and then nothing comes of it, and we're like.
But we did know because of our tentacles in the
Yes.
space,
Yeah.
we knew that rescues were going to go to his property. And during his suspension, he ended up getting rid of like 400, 450 in one day. So rescues were lined up. Again, Rosie and Alexis were there. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't think this man knows how close we are always in his orbit.
Yeah.
Like, in general, we're very close in this space. But yeah, Rosie and Alexis went down. They saved a bunch of dogs from his property. These dogs were spread out all over the country, though, and so was a lot of misinformation because the headlines, Alexis and I are a stickler for facts. We're a stickler for just like, no, it's good news, but say it the right way.
Yeah, wording is important.
All of the headlines were like, horrible puppy mill shut down, 700 dogs rescued. And we were like, wait. He wasn't shut down. It's a temporary suspension. He only gave less than half of the dogs he had on his property to rescues. Like, the misinformation that was spread was a little hurtful because no, he didn't close. And so even when we posted today that his license is canceled, it was with the caveat of, we're excited, but we don't know if he's going to start up again.
Yep.
So,
So the flip side of my question of how will we know if he gets a new license?
Yeah.
If he doesn't, he's got a lot of dogs that should be going somewhere. If he's seriously, I'm canceling my license, I'm out of the gig.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dogs that need to be accounted for.
Yeah.
And he could
send one text message and rescues would come line up.
Or he could sell
them.
Yeah.
He could transfer them to someone else,
Yep.
the nephew or whoever.
Yeah.
This man, I'm trying to choose my words carefully.
Yeah.
He euthanized 199 golden retrievers in one day, and he called them vicious. I don't think that he values animal life in the way that we do, and canine life in the way he doesn't see them as like our best friends, man's best friend. I haven't met one vicious golden retriever. One, right? And let alone 199. And that again was a part of that Daniel
And if
Gingrich
they're vicious,
case.
they were made that way.
Right. And so it's like, we don't know what is going to happen in this case. Like, say he's done. He has people who are going to buy his dogs. He has bloodlines that he is very proud of. He does import dogs from other countries. Like, I've heard, again, our work in the breeding industry, we've been able to hear little tidbits of people that we only see on pieces of paper.
Yeah.
And everyone says like how smart he is and how really good at like genetics and that kind of stuff he is. He could have used his wits for good and not evil.
Yeah.
But instead he's running a facility. For people who don't know, at any time he could have upwards of 800 adult breeding dogs on his property. And so paired that with the violations that come out where they know the inspector is coming, and so they just cut off the toenails of every dog in their property. They don't care about the quick. They don't care about making sure the dog's toenails are cared for. No, they just chop them all off. And then we have USDA photos of dogs covered in blood because they did not care to be careful.
That happened. That was documented.
Right,
and how is that, if you're concerned that the USDA inspector is going to cite you for not having cut the toenails, how is that
exactly
a solution? Like, to me, that feels like a bigger
but
violation.
this person doesn't make rational decisions all the time, which is we see the irrational side. So in 2016, he got suspended for throwing a bag of dead puppies at an inspector. And this was documented. This was put out there, and he wasn't charged with assault. And that was a time period where we were seeing a lot of behavior like that here in Iowa from these commercial breeders. We had 2 others that threatened physical harm to inspectors. Like, they were going to inject them with a liquid that the inspector had no idea. That was one case. And another case, they threatened to pull a gun on an inspector. So like, walking into some of these facilities, sometimes you're already dealing with people who feel attacked and might be slightly unhinged, right? Because of that. He has this history of not caring about humans. He's, like I said, throwing a bag of puppies at an inspector. He's getting a suspension, and then the USDA is like, okay, your suspension is over. Continue to do what you would like.
And like, too, we talk about like laundering with him a lot, but he's got like properties that he owns that other people run. And also, like, if he's getting violations with certain dogs, we've suspected that he shells them off to other properties. Like we had Juanita Swedlin, who ended up getting a lot of violations. So it's not hard to believe that if he's getting violations with like certain dogs, why he gets a clean inspection report the next time is because he moved them to other properties that he owns, and then also those people took on the damage of like getting horrendous violations as well.
And before Juanita, it was Woody Wiley. So like that's this one property Steve owns. He manages, his dogs are there. He isn't upgrading those kennels. I mean, we've seen photos from the USDA. We've seen the violations. That situation's not getting any better. And it's caused by him. But that other person, his manager's name is on it. And then the other facility is a brokering facility because Steve says he doesn't raise puppies. He breeds dogs. So he has, when we say 800 adult breeding dogs, the majority of those are female. His job is to get them pregnant. And once they are close to being whelped, he drops the mom off at the other place, at Brian Licuri's. So then Brian, his facility, his operators give birth to those puppies, wean those puppies. Mom goes back to Steve or Juanita, gets all those violations because it doesn't matter. But then Brian sells this puppy with a quote unquote clean slate. And then Brian's puppy gets to go to a state like Connecticut or a state like Arizona where you can't buy from breeders with direct violations. But don't worry, Brian doesn't have any. Steve had it. But my God, we can't convince the state of Connecticut that Brian Licuri is actually Steve. They have all of the documents. We've made a little case for them and we've said, look.
Right from the Department of Agriculture. This is their investigation. This is what they found out. This is what they said. And still nothing.
No, and we were told in that case that the state can't prove that, but they have strongly warned the stores against buying from that operator. And it's like, cool, but they're still going to. Thanks for the warning.
We still see them on CVIs. Like, here's that connection. Like, okay. Thanks. Feels so listened to.
And that's the hard part when we talk about shutting down puppy mills. Like you asked today, why can't we shut down a puppy mill? Well, in this case specifically, we've gone to the sheriff. The state of Iowa knows. We've gone to the USDA. We've gone to the Iowa Attorney General. We've gone to the Connecticut Attorney General. We have gone to so many different outlets. We're just constantly nipping at his heels. And basically what we found that works is being loud and being that squeaky wheel and just not letting him get away with his bullshit. Because like no one's calling him on it. No one has for years besides the random headline of like the ASPCA is suing him. We're suing the USDA over him. And it's like, well, that's like a headline. Like, is that going to be the nail in the coffin? Who knows? But we've had a decade or more of trying to get this one actor to comply with any type of regulation, and he just won't. And he's the reason why we care about the loophole bill in Iowa, because he could not exist the way he does if he had to follow our state laws. But he gets to default to USDA standards. And he's barely meeting those. And his dogs live in boxes. Like truly, we have, USDA photos. We could post a whole album of just his violations. But you see it. They're on hardwire kennel flooring. And then they are just in an open-sided, I don't want to say open-sided box, but the kennels are all next to each other. So you just have rows and rows and rows of dogs. 800 of them. You just see all of the dogs in these buildings. And they're separated by that wire mesh. And that's their life. No windows, no fresh air. We heard from a person in this industry, I won't say what their role was, but they had gone to visit Kruse's facility at one point with their child, and they had an English Mastiff. And Kruse was talking about how the Mastiff was imported, how expensive it was. It was like $12,000 dog or something stupid, right? It's too much money. And the kid was like, well, how do you get the dog out of the cage? Because it's up, right? It's an elevated cage. And he looked at the kid and was like, that dog will tear your arm off. What do you mean? He doesn't get out of that cage. That's where he lives. And this kid whose dad is in the industry was like disturbed and crying because he realized like, oh, some people do keep their dogs like that. And so getting people within the industry, they're admitting stuff like this. They're telling us how bad this character is, but he's just like, he's the secret we don't talk about. He's the weird uncle that everyone knows is weird. And he's not chill, but he's the uncle. We have to be nice to him. Like, we just don't know why he's so important to this industry. But everyone is like licking his boots to keep him in business. And I just don't understand it.
It's very discouraging. And my question earlier of like, why can't we shut down puppies? It wasn't, why can't we bailing out Benji, or why can't we animal welfare groups shut down puppy mills. It's why aren't there laws that make this illegal?
Yeah.
Why is this not animal abuse? Like, why, if I used the analogy earlier, and it's not, I don't want to compare children and animals, but like at a daycare center, if you find that there's neglect and abuse, that center is shut down.
Yeah.
No questions asked. It's not even a debate. It's not controversial.
Yeah.
It's shut down. So why, when we have so many, like everyone, USDA level, breeder level, advocacy group level will say horrible conditions.
Yeah.
Why is there no mechanism to make it stop?
The problem is too, like some places there are no mechanisms, some places there are, because like when we file our complaint against Steve, we cited our animal cruelty laws in Iowa, and we literally laid it out, highlighted the code that we're like, hey, we think these violations that we laid out for you that are coming directly from the USDA, we believe this violates our animal cruelty code. And then still nothing. So I think it is partly lack of backbone for calling out these people, but also the enforcement isn't there even when it is there. So it's like, what type of like cultures are in that community that maybe makes them less likely to step up to Steve Kruse? If he's a pinnacle in his community and in his environment, if his money helps the community, would people be less likely to step in and stop him because he has hundreds of dogs? He's probably making a lot of money that can benefit a lot of people. So I think that too is like trying to get people that are actually going to enforce rules while also making sure that there are regulations, proper regulations in place that we can call on in these situations. So it's kind of that like situation where sometimes there aren't any that we can call on and sometimes there are, but people aren't willing to act on it, even when we call it out.
This is your plug, if you're listening, to also pay attention to your county sheriffs when you are voting.
Yes.
Because if you have county sheriffs that are deeply connected to potential criminals in your community, then maybe those criminals won't be held accountable.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that sometimes. Like, you have to also make sure when you're voting, you are looking at people in your community that are going to do what's best for your community.
Yes. So local voting is very important.
Yeah. So we always talk about like everyone pays attention to the national elections, but on a day-to-day basis, like it's those local elections that affect your life day to day more than the national ones. So pay attention.
Please do. Because beyond frustrating to see so many violations coming out of one single facility. And something that like doesn't get talked about for these violations is that like there are many dogs affected, because you think, well, he can have anywhere from like 400 because he had 430 dogs on his last inspection report, but we've seen upwards of 800. Like that's a lot of dogs at one facility, but you see like maybe a handful of violations coming out of his facility. But when you look at that inspection report, it is a long list of dogs under a single violation that have an issue with that violation. And so whereas like we think that should be an individual violation per dog, all the public gets to see then is that, oh, he got this one violation.
He got one direct violation, but it should be 50 because 50 dogs had their nails cut off, not one.
And so like giving that to the county sheriff and saying like, hey, this is how many dogs are being affected. This is exactly what's happening. And then to not even have like the backbone of our animal cruelty laws be able to step in those instances to help those dogs who are consistently in terrible situations is also a very hard thing to see.
And this case, most cases, I would say, of these commercial dog breeders are in rural communities. So there are a lot more politics, local politics in that. And I don't mean the ones you vote for. It is the who you know. And so you have to keep that in mind. And when the LA Times people were coming over here to take photos and videos and they wanted to go down to that community and knock doors, the hell you are. Like, no. They have signs that say, we will shoot trespassers. Like, there are places that don't play around. And we tend to kind of be dipping our toes in that water quite a bit. So safety is always a concern. But yeah, like we are anticipating, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he's done? We can't tell the future. Or do you think he's just getting a new license because it's been a minute?
I'm leaning towards I think he's done because I mean he's had these egregious violations for years. Like he's got a long bad rep. Why hasn't he switched prior to this? And like
So this
if
is
you
the
know
first
him,
you've seen him cancel his license.
No, he
It'll-
canceled
he has-
one in like 1999.
Okay.
yeah,
So some breeders cancel like every
Mhm.
3 or 4 years, and we will have a list of 10
yeah.
numbers that we're tracking for them.
Mhm.
He is not one of those people.
Mhm.
So the fact that this happened is pretty surprising.
Yeah, it's something like we're checking constantly to see if something's changed. And so I do think maybe he is out of the business because like when I was at his property and like when I think I saw him, like he's an older man. And so maybe it's just retirement. Maybe he's tired of constantly being nipped at, and is finally like, I'm out. I mean, we've heard stories too, like when he was in his suspension, like people had suspected that maybe he was closing shop and he was going to move to another state with less regulation. Like, so there's been this like kind of like, oh, okay, well, do you really want to start over a new business when you're like this old and like in the game? I don't know. I'm leaning towards I think that it might be canceled for good, but it might be changing hands is what I'm suspecting.
Right.
And
Even
what
if
we've talked
he's
about.
done,
He's done.
he's just going to pass the whole thing
Yeah.
on to whoever is next in
Yeah,
line.
but I would argue there's some hope in that.
Mhm.
Sure.
Maybe because this
Yeah.
new breed of breeders, LOL,
Yeah.
that we are seeing coming through,
Mhm.
they do seem to be a little more compassionate and a little more willing to get away from the bad reputation of
Mhm.
whoever came prior. Could we see someone fall right into his business model? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that next person might not be as tricky as he
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
And we are very, very quick to catch on to what he is doing.
Yeah.
Whether or not the complaints matter, we are filing complaints on that type of business model regularly. Like Tracy, our volunteer in the Quad Cities, she noticed that basically his puppies were going to the local newspaper and they weren't being labeled correctly. And then we've got the Connecticut situation. So we are constantly catching him. Will that next licensee holder be able to hide from us? Will they be
Yeah.
able to bounce back when we find horrific things or when other people find horrific things?
Mhm.
We're not sure.
Mhm.
But I think there's also a personal responsibility in the pet industry, like the pet stores.
Yeah.
As we've been involved in this, we keep saying over the last year and a half things have changed.
Mhm.
Truly, people can't see that. We can see it.
Yeah.
We can see based on the conversations we're having, but just our little input into this breeder world, we have seen kind of an explosion on their end. And
Mhm.
it's a lot of people wanting to prove, whether it's prove to us or just prove to the world that they are different than people who operate like Steve.
Mhm.
We're seeing breeders coming forward and saying, we are not like that. We are different.
Yeah.
I think that we are also going to start seeing pet stores, whether or not you like the pet store model,
Mhm.
trying to distance themselves away from characters like this. And
Yeah.
we see that when they're like leaning into the canine care model a
Mhm.
little bit. But advocates and the public can push back on that stuff.
Absolutely. I think being an informed consumer has been a very much on the rise trend. And thankfully, we've been seeing that even in this industry in pet acquisition is that people want to be informed. They want to make sure that they're not getting from a puppy mill. We get so many emails from people asking us about breeders now, asking us to help them find a reputable breeder or if they can have any information about a breeder. And so I just think that it's going to get much harder for these next generations of breeders to avoid that because consumers want to know where their money is going and they want to know like the quality facility, like what quality of the facility they're getting from.
Right. And that's something we haven't necessarily talked about, but it kind of popped into my head. Like there is a world in which Steve doesn't need a USDA license anymore. Like if he were to cancel and just go direct to the public. Now he would have to stop his transferring back and forth. So he is a USDA broker, basically because he buys and sells his own puppies back and forth. And he probably buys from community people as well, but he's really just the dog person. He's not the puppy person.
Yeah.
So his broker license is because he's transferring adults back and forth to his own properties essentially, but they all have their own licenses. Technically, there's a world that exists where he wouldn't need a broker license because he's not transferring dogs back and forth between properties. And maybe he sells direct to the public.
Yeah.
Or just online or
Yeah.
something. So like we still monitor state records, we still monitor other things. But yeah, if he were to say close up and move to Tennessee, unless he gets a USDA license there, we can only find him if we catch him online, if we catch him through CVIs, if we catch him elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so when we celebrate things, we never fully are celebrating. It's just like, oh, fun win for the morning.
Yeah.
Now we're going to keep monitoring because it's always evolving.
Yeah. Or other avenues, other loopholes. Moving to Tennessee, not regulated breeders, state breeders. USDA would be the only license. And yeah, we wouldn't be able to tell what would be happening because he would probably still need to be licensed in Iowa at the state level if he got rid of USDA, didn't broker, didn't sell out of state, but we could still monitor in Iowa. But Tennessee, no records, nothing.
And the state of Iowa will be hearing from us today, just so they know that he's no longer USDA because now he is very directly in their purview.
Still on the IDOL's website as of this morning. So
So just making sure things like that. That's kind of what we do. It's all the fun behind the scenes stuff. So one of the angles that we've been taking with Steve is, I think we mentioned it a few episodes ago, his name isn't on CVIs anymore.
No.
So prior to 2016, his name was on everything. We knew exactly where he was selling. Now we know where he's selling because of Brian Licuri.
Yeah.
So if Brian's name pops up somewhere, we know those are Steve's dogs.
Yeah, and that goes back for our listeners to that FOIA request that we got after we saw him at the auction and filed the complaints and stuff. It literally said in there that he gives his pregnant dogs to Brian Licuri, and we have an article about that on our website if people want to learn more. But that's how we get that connection and why we're confident for now because the government told us. So,
But our angle now is no longer just saying, oh, that Connecticut store buys from Brian. We are now just saying, no. They're buying directly from Steve. Whether or not we have the paperwork, we want these stores held accountable because it's not chill that you can just walk into a pet store in Connecticut and see Brian's name.
Yeah.
And that consumer thinks they're buying a well-bred puppy with no violations because the state law says the stores cannot sell puppies from breeders with direct violation.
Yeah.
And is Brian listed as a breeder even though he's not breeding dogs?
He's technically, I don't know, he's whelping the puppies.
Right.
Yeah.
He's listed as the breeder on, Connecticut has different paperwork that we look at. Listed on that paperwork as a breeder. He still owns a broker license just because, again, that trading the adults back and forth.
Yeah.
But he is listed as the breeder.
Is it normal in other situations, like at a pet store, if I'm at a pet store and I'm seeing a dog and I'm like, I want to know who the breeder is, that they would give me the broker's name, not the breeder?
Right. So it does happen. So when you're looking at like just CVIs, it'll often just say the broker name. We know who supplies the brokers because of our other research that we do. We don't just look into pet stores. But when you're saying like, say, Pinnacle is selling to Petland, like that little thing, it's just going to say Pinnacle Petland. It's not going to say Pinnacle 10 dogs, here's every breeder.
Yeah.
It's just that one CVI. But the way Connecticut does their
Pinnacle's a broker.
The broker.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the way Connecticut does their records is that the pet store has to have like an individual, they call it a certificate of origin. Every puppy has a certificate of origin and the pet store has to turn that into the state. So we get CVIs and we get these COOs, which is very fun in our world full of acronyms. But that says breeder, broker, then buyer. It tells you who buys the puppy too. But in these cases, it should say breeder Steve Kruse, broker Brian Licuri, but instead it just says Brian.
Yeah.
There's no way to like really track. Like we didn't know prior to this FOIA that Steve was giving his female pregnant dogs to Brian Licuri because we don't have internal documents in our state for transfers like that. Our CVIs, we only get those like when they travel out of state. So there's nothing in state. And so that does make it really hard to know where brokers are buying from if they're buying in state. Out of state, if they come there, we can get records.
Like there's a weird, like in Iowa at least, there's a weird caveat where it's like if it's a USDA to USDA, no CVI CVI is needed.
Mhm.
But if you don't have a CVI or a license, you can sell a puppy to her. You need a CVI
Mhm.
because you're not licensed and she is. Like, so there's some weird caveats to all of
Yeah.
it, which is why we often find unlicensed breeders through our broker work.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of glaring transparency issues
Mhm.
in all of this.
And
Yeah.
from the consumer perspective, back to the pet store, when I say who's the breeder and they show me the name,
Mhm.
and I'm going to research that name and I'm going to use our search tool, is it going to tell me if I look that person up? Is it going to say this is a broker?
Yeah.
And then I have to know what that means
Yeah.
as a consumer, and I'm
Right.
probably not going to.
Right.
Yeah.
But we get people who email us and they say, hey, I bought a dog and it says Brian Lakiri, and then I Googled it and I just need you to explain this to me. Like,
Yeah.
people are doing their research, and
Mhm.
sometimes, unfortunately, it's after.
Yeah.
Sure.
But more people are coming to us before, and that's
It
really
is.
nice to see.
Yeah, it is really nice. I mean, it's unfortunate that there's the after, but then like when they know, they can tell other people, and then they
Yeah.
can help people like, hey, like you can do your research. Like bailing out Benji is there to help. Like, so I think that does help with that trend of seeing people ask us even before they buy. Definitely see more of that incline for those.
Yeah.
And with Steve, it's not just pet stores, right? And in most breeders, it's not just pet stores, but there's the online aspect that is impossible to track. I mean, it's impossible to get a handle on. We're
Yeah.
trying,
Mhm.
but the ghost litters, right? That's something that came out in that FOIA.
Mhm.
Steve just has litters of puppies that like are off the radar. And I'm sure this is standard. Like, this is not special to him in his practice, but who can monitor a litter of puppies? How do you know? How does anyone know ever how many litters of puppies I'm having in my basement, right? Like, it's this world, it's so easy to get away with so much.
Yeah.
That in this report,
Mhm.
it was talking about ghost litters and how it's those puppies that aren't going to stores, aren't going anywhere official. Oh, just sell them on Craigslist. Sell them through whoever you need to sell them through to get them sold.
Mhm.
And so it goes back to last week's episode with rescues being that B market.
Mhm.
And if there's one rescue who's getting 100 puppies on a shipment coming from Steve Kruse's part of the world, you don't mean to tell me those puppies are coming from him too? Like, when your scope is so big, everything kind of comes back to you.
Mhm.
Everything comes back to him.
Yeah. Reaches very far.
Interesting.
So we'll talk about Daniel Gingrich, I think, because we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of
Mhm.
him being shut down and those dogs being rescued. But the back end of it that doesn't get talked about a lot is how deeply involved Steve was in that case.
Mhm.
So for people, I'll give you the very quick gist of it. Daniel Gingrich was a breeder here in Iowa. He had, at the height of his level, 1,000 dogs, adults and puppies, hidden in 13 to 15 properties across Iowa. His largest facility had hundreds of dogs, but he truly had dozens of dogs hidden with friends and family people. In his mind, now that I've read all the records and we're years and years out,
Mhm.
he was basically copying Steve's model,
Mhm.
and Steve was the source of his puppies. And this all came out through court cases where if Daniel needed money, Steve gave him a loan. And at one point, Daniel Gingrich, who was only 26, and you're an adult, you're a fully formed adult at 26. However, if you have those influences around you, you're going to make decisions that the influences help you make.
Mhm.
So at one point, Daniel Gingrich owed $600,000 to the bank and to Steve Kruse. And in Amish culture, you don't want to owe money to the bank. Like, it's not, you don't take out loans like that. It's very community focused.
Mhm.
Daniel Gingrich is Amish.
He was an Amish breeder in southern Iowa.
Is Steve Kruse
No,
Amish? Okay,
no, he's just in that area.
gotcha.
And so in the
So
court,
he'd kind of taken on Daniel Gingrich as kind of a mentor relationship, or was it a business relationship?
I think it was a
Like,
business,
you
like,
work for
you're
me,
another
or you are a partner, or
it was a separate license. I don't think
Yeah.
we'll ever fully know
Yeah.
behind the scenes. It was a separate license, but the dogs were regularly coming back and forth between Daniel and Steve.
the
in
same
the fashion,
situation as Steve and Brian.
Unsure.
Okay.
I think it was the dogs that Steve needed to get rid of.
Mhm.
Like, say they weren't going to that other property, Juanita's property or Woody Wiley's property. I think he was selling dogs to Daniel. Or like what was very common in this case that we learned with all of those different properties that I mentioned, Daniel would give somebody, say, 6 dogs to breed, and he would say like, oh, I'll sell the puppies and then you'll get money back. Like it was never like, you're paying me for these dogs. It was always like, we're trading in cost of puppies and the money from that. It was a very weird situation. But Steve, in all of the inspection reports for Daniel Gingrich, Steve is being quoted as him being the owner of some of these dogs. And so earlier when I said he euthanized 199, at the height of this Daniel Gingrich stuff, we're raising the alarm. 220 violations in 10 months, unheard of.
Yeah.
No one is shutting him down. We are screaming about this. Like, can someone please look at us and listen?
How many inspections take place in 10 months?
They were there like every 3 weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks.
Because they came, it's horrendous, they come back, they come back, they come back.
You're supposed to correct the violations. They give you a deadline sometimes for like violations and say like, this should be corrected by this date.
Right.
And then they'll come back.
And then they come back and he's just like,
it's not.
It's like, oh,
fixed.
guess what? Now I have more.
Yeah,
I found even
actually.
more. But that was kind of it. And so as the USDA is like, you've got to downsize. At the time, Daniel was given another suspension. He was given a variance to sell some dogs at an auction. Like, the USDA does give variances in these. But at one point, Daniel transferred 199 golden retrievers back to Steve, who was their original owner. I don't remember exactly how it was worded. He euthanized all of them in one day, and because they were vicious. And so it's like, if you have too many dogs to handle and you're not responsible enough in those scenarios, like, you mean to tell me you couldn't find a single rescue, a dozen rescues to come and take those dogs off your hands? Like, those actions are what make me think, like, are you like a good person? Like, how do you just euthanize 199 dogs in one day and not even think about it?
And I feel like, and we're making assumptions, I feel like euthanize is probably a gentle word for what happened to the 199 dogs.
Yeah.
Probably not what we think of as euthanized.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yeah. And so that's kind of like when we say is tentacles.
Yeah.
That's what we mean. It's like all of these people he's involved with are taking the fall for his influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know people have questioned our work in the breeding world. Like, why are you talking to breeders? And why are you, you know, entertaining this? It's because we get to point these things out and say, like, okay, well, if you're doing better and you care about this, why is he allowed to exist? And the more people in that industry who kind of tear this apart, it just helps us and helps the dogs. Because we don't have, I mean, our policy goal for him, for this right here, is closing that loophole.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not trying to run him specifically out of business. We just want him to follow our laws. And I think I said once, like, if he were to just like completely comply, we would be the first ones celebrating.
Yes.
Like, we'll take our cameras down. We'll do a whole episode. Show us how wonderful your kennels are now. Like, we want to celebrate that. I don't want to have to think about 800 dogs suffering every single day at the hands of someone who isn't trying to make their lives better or as good as they possibly can be.
Yeah. And to the folks who say, why are you talking to people in the breeding world? We're not going to shut the door to that whole population of people that so directly affects the work we're doing because this section of the population is bad. We're not going to talk to anyone over there. Like, that's just not productive or realistic. I mean, the breeders who are stepping up and who are wanting to set themselves apart have a lot to offer us in that insight into their industry and into why and how people like Steve Kruse can continue to operate things that we can only make assumptions about and guess at. You know, just getting that glimpse into the other side of it, we can get so much more information to share.
We've learned so much. Just by, I mean, we went to Missouri and we're given like the whole history of the Hunt Corporation and all of these old breeders, these names that like we've known for years. It's like, oh, we're just given this little historical tour down here. And it's so interesting to see. And then even in some of the breeders that we visited, they felt notorious. We felt like we were missing part of it because we're like, oh, they're on all these CVIs. We must be missing something because there aren't violations. Even the perspective of going into kennels, assuming we're going to see one thing and then seeing something completely different has been really interesting. But it's those people who need to feel, I don't want to say safe, but need to feel comfortable setting themselves apart. And again, if we call them all puppy mills,
Right.
Yeah.
it gives Steve the ability to exist with that cloak. He's like, yep, we're all puppy mills. All of us. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. And it doesn't matter what they're doing because we're all bad. And so if we can keep drawing that out and pulling it apart, I think it'll help.
Yeah. And I think people within like your own community, if it's like the breeders are actually saying something, that holds a lot more weight, I think, even with like our legislators than like the advocate groups,
sure.
because like they're in it. They see it day to day, and like we're kind of like a step removed. But like if it's the people closest to the industry that are calling out, like that holds a lot of weight for legislators. I think that holds a lot of weight in general for making change, because like they're going to affect the most change because they're the closest to it, and they can probably apply the most pressure as well.
Yeah. And lawmakers specifically, as heated as they can be, they don't want a mess handed to them. It is much easier when you say, hey, guess what? These two sides of an issue are talking about it, and here's our proposal together.
Yeah.
And I think lawmakers, especially in a time where they have to follow whatever the agenda is, and whoever's in power in the state house or whatever, they have to really follow that agenda. It's hard for them to work on what we think are easy issues. Like, how can you work on a puppy mill bill when there are people suffering in your state? So lawmakers they don't have as much time as we wish they had, and we need to make things easy for them.
Yeah.
And especially, you mentioned earlier that a lot of it seems to be at the government level, seems to be about protecting these breeders. Like, we do want to, I mean, it's a business after all, and we tend to, as a country, we want to enable people to have business. Like, that's important. So advocacy groups kind of always coming at these businesses, I can see how if we can get those breeders, if we come to the table together, that's going to be a lot easier for legislators to promote, to say, okay, this group is not attacking this industry. They're coming with this industry, asking for change. And those industry leaders are going to have a lot more sway than groups like ours will.
Earlier, when you asked, basically, why can't we shut down a puppy mill, you had a beautiful answer. This popped into my head. I meant to say it earlier, but dogs are considered property, and that's something we don't talk enough about either. So when you were talking about child care versus, this licensed breeding facility, like, technically those dogs are owned by Steve, and so he can treat them as he would like, right? And so that's kind of the other part. When the USDA goes in to shut down a place, or the state of Iowa, what we often see is the dog, what we hope to see is the dog just being taken. And they get to go to rescues, they get to go to the ARL, whatever, and then they find homes. Their property, they are allowed to sell those dogs. Yeah. They're allowed to do whatever they want to with those dogs. And so our way of celebrating, like, say he closes, he could go to Missouri tomorrow and sell those $800, $400, whatever he had on this last report, sell them to the highest bidder. And we're going to be mad about that, but that's his right technically, and the industry exists. And so, he could just profit insanely off of those dogs, or he can surrender them and make no money off of them. So that's another part of that answer. They are property in the eyes of the law.
And certain values. I think that, it comes down to how the law and people's values see dogs.
Well, it's when we talk too about like our maps, and how at every event, and even our 2 13-year-old friends, one of the first things people say is, oh my gosh, why? All of the breeders are in the middle of the country. And you're like, actually, they're not. But that's where the agriculture is. And so especially in states like this, when you talk about animals being property, like that is the Midwest. That's what we're built on, is animals are property. And so there's not a distinction between a cow and a dog. Like, you're farming dogs.
Right. But in Iowa, they had to, our Department of Ag, because we couldn't get anywhere with rules, with laws, they had to separate and say, okay, now we have a companion animal department. But that department is less than like 6 years old. Like, it was very recent history that we now have a companion animal person in charge of that. For that exact reason.
And I still say, not that my life has been remarkably short, but this companion animal explosion is recent. Like, even if it's 40 years, 30 years, in the scope of government, that's recent. Like, so to expect government to catch up with what, when I was a kid, animals were more property. They lived outside. They were not leashed. They roamed wherever they found their own food. Like, and now it's a very different world.
Yes, that makes me think of like Iowa's laws about like animal abuse. Like that just changed a few years ago. Like animal abuse in our state was seen as something that somebody else did to your dog, not like what you did to your dog. Like that just changed a few years ago. Like
and the weird, what we think a companion animal is. Our definition of a companion animal, dog and cat. Okay, cool. What about rabbits?
Horses.
Because rabbits are 4-H animals. Rabbits are raised for farm purposes. Rabbits are raised for meat. Rabbits are raised for fur. But my rabbits are pets. And so if I want to pass a law to protect my rabbit, then we have 4-H coming after us, and we have ag coming after us. So in our state as well, when we're talking about companion animals and we're trying to be careful, that's because horses, like you mentioned, are not companion animals. And so what if my horse is abused, right? Like different laws have to fit different scenarios. But it's all because now we are putting more value on these lives than we ever have before. And where does that line, where do you draw that line for companion animal? So it's also fascinating.
It's
like,
very fascinating.
It's interesting. But again, these gaps in all of these laws and the different definitions, that's what allows bad actors to flourish.
Yes.
And so when you were asking, why isn't there a law in all 50 states? Well, that would be the perfect way of handling this.
And I think as complicated as it is and as fascinating as it is, like these conversations help. And I mean, I'm not going to plug the podcast on the podcast because the people watching the podcast are already listening to the podcast. But I do hope that people will tune in because I have those questions. When I see something happen, you have that, you want to like bring it down to the simplest possible thing, right? And why can't it just be this? And that's simple. So let's talk about all the reasons why it's not that way. And it's so helpful. And so we see it when we do a social media post and people are like, they need to just do this. Okay, so let's talk. When you sit down and start talking through, okay, so what if we just did this? So then this, and then that, and then you start to realize, oh, okay, I get it now. It's not that simple. Even though we want it to be so simple, it's not. And it's valuable. It's helpful to me. So I wish that some of the folks that I see out there that are really just like, you know, with those extreme responses, like sit down and think about it or have that conversation to work through it and
just consider the nuances.
Yes.
And that's really what this whole show has been. Like we're talking about hard issues, not popular issues.
Nope.
That's the point though, because we've all kind of known these things for a long time, but no one has felt comfortable talking about the weird nuances. And I think
well, and because we want simple, there is a case to be made for organizations like ours to provide simple, right? Because that's what people want and that's what people react to. And so I think that's a lot of it kind of feeds some of those comments that like, well, you know, this group is like, let's just pass this law. And now we're like, pet store ban. Why don't we just pass it? Like we're done. And then we can move on to the next thing. And like, because we refuse to sit in the simple and be satisfied with the simple answer. Even when somebody gives us a simple answer, we're like, I don't know about that. We're going to look deeper. So because that's just our mentality. Like we're going to keep digging into that complicated and not be satisfied with the simple, even though it's easier.
And we're not stuck in the time that the thing is occurring. So like we learn from our mistakes, right? We learn after the fact. We crave that knowledge. And so when we're talking about, you know, that Daniel Gingrich case, we've learned so much in the 4 years. We thought we knew everything at the time, and we did. But now through the work that we've been doing the last year and a half, we realize how many other people were involved in this case. And so that perspective helps shift our way of doing things for the future because we're able to be introspective and really do the deep thinking of like, where should we be going based on the knowledge we have? We're not stuck on the knowledge we had 20 years ago.
I don't understand. We're beating the system. It's like look at the whole system.
The system sucks. And everyone's acknowledged it. And I think that talking about the wide breadth of the spectrum and how bad it is from top to bottom is really
Yes.
helpful.
Yeah.
But that means that we also have to be critical of ourselves and
Yeah.
our side of this in the game
Absolutely.
too. So
We're a cog in the machine. So
Yeah.
pretty much.
Mhm.
But then next week's episode, we're going to talk about the Daniel Gingrich case and like what we've learned. So it's kind of just fun how
Yeah.
it flows nicely.
And we
Yeah.
had planned to talk about this today before
yeah,
we came in and saw
before the
it.
news.
So it was like, oh look, we're our schedule today was to talk about Steve Kruse and that whole kind of empire
Mhm.
leading into the Daniel Gingrich discussion. And then we get this little
this little nugget,
this little
Little
Easter
wince
egg
egg.
this
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah.
Oh look.
Yeah.
right. It's just
Funny.
always interesting when
So-
something happens in his world. And
Yeah.
we get to know
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for anyone listening though, like make no mistake, because of our new connections that we've made, we've been able to put a lot of pressure on the pet industry to not support actors like Steve.
Yeah.
And whether or not you're publicly seeing all of these efforts that we are working on, like they are working.
Yes.
And we are
Mhm.
seeing a lot of these biggest players kind of panicking to move away from that
Mhm.
type of character. So it works. It works to keep having conversations with people you don't necessarily. What's that book? It's Collaborating with the Enemy.
Yes.
How to Work with People I Don't Like and Don't Trust.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's a phenomenal book. I think
Mhm.
it's a longer
Yeah.
title than that. But that's truly it. Like we have so much to learn from each other.
Mhm.
And we have ways of making a change without it being the noisy protesters from the side of the street.
Yeah.
So we're trying
Absolutely.
all the tools in our toolbox.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep.
Building a bridge has given us a lot more transparency. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. Like we've been getting phenomenal feedback, I feel like, from people who are sitting with it. And again, not all the conversations we have are easy.
No. Yeah.
But to have our volunteers like Shannon
Yes.
and Lauren and other Shannon, like coming forward and saying like, wow, you're challenging how I'm thinking about these things is so cool.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. And big kudos to them for being willing to sit in that discomfort and to keep an open mind when we say, here's what we're going to talk about. And they're like, and then they listen with an open mind and they think about it and they ask really good questions. They're not afraid to push back and to say, you know, like they will reach out and ask us questions or debate things that they're not on board with, but they're having the conversations and that's what matters. They're thinking about it.
Yeah.
They're opening themselves up. They're sticking around even when they're like, I'm not sure.
It's fair.
You know, just we always say do it for the plot, right? Just hang in there, see where it goes.
And that speaks volumes to us because we don't expect our volunteers to read a script.
No.
We don't expect you to be a part of a cult and like say what we say. Like we're all so experienced in our own worlds and we all come at this from our own experience, I guess. But like we can't tell you how to feel about certain things. We just make a space safe enough for you to have those conversations and push back.
Yeah.
And our volunteers are passionate about animals. We're often just one of the organizations they're working with or that they're involved with, right? So they have perspectives from other organizations as well that they can bring to the conversation and we can talk about those things of like these people say this, you all are saying this, and we can talk about the difference and why we say this and then it's on them to make the decision of they want to hold those two things, you know, or like maybe I'm parting ways with one or the other or whatever, but it's just that again, not being held to the simple.
No, and bringing those conversations to their community has made me very excited. Them talking about that of like, oh, because like we're here in Iowa, but they're having conversations in Texas and Pennsylvania, and they are challenging the norms. Like we are bringing up these questions, whether they like fully believe in it or not. It's at least we're having the time to have the conversation about it, and like it's not being not talked about like it's been in the past. Like.
Right. Well, and like some people within our own organization aren't okay with commercial dog breeding. I can't convince them that a place that we are seeing isn't that they'll be okay with. I can tell them it is not cruel, it is not inhumane, and it is not a puppy mill, and they will believe me. But they might still be uncomfortable with someone holding a breeding license to breed dogs for money. I can't tell them to not feel comfortable about that. But I can ask them to be respectful about the language and mindful about the language they use when educating. And I think
when educating as bailing out Benji.
Yeah.
And that's something that we will bring up, that like if you're talking to your neighbor over the fence in the backyard, that's you. But when you're in an event or a protest for bailing out Benji, then you know, here's, like you said, be mindful of our message. But that's something that, you know, when you volunteer for an organization, that's an expectation.
We're just, I mean, I would say we're more flexible in the fact that we don't have scripts that they have to believe it all. And they don't have to say it all, right? So I remember like Tom, when we first started talking about this last summer, he's like, well, what do I say at my tables? And I was like, Tom, you don't have to mention canine care. You don't have to mention Amish.
Anything.
You don't have to mention a single thing. It was after that first meeting that we did. He was like, okay, what do I say? And I was like, oh, I love your passion. But you don't have to change a thing because it doesn't affect you. We're just giving you some perspective on what we're doing and seeing. So it's cool to see how they try to make it make sense in their communities. Because again, if Colorado's problem that we're seeing right now is those puppy imports to rescues, our talking points in that state have got to be different. If states like Illinois have quote unquote no puppy stores, like you have to educate differently in states. And so that's where our strength has always been, pivoting, because when the laws change, our talking points have to change. And now we're kind of just doing that on a much bigger scale than before.
And that our local volunteers know what's happening in their area. And they can talk to that in their community.
Well, thanks for listening and being a part of the conversation. We always welcome emails, comments, feedback. Like I said, we just did the laws. Those were some uncomfortable conversations. I'm sure we'll hear some feedback too. And I think those are kind of airing right now as we're recording this. So, but feel free to follow us on social media. And do we have a donation ask or just a generic?
I mean, we're always asking for donations. So yeah, I mean, you alluded to it earlier when you were like, you know, the behind the scenes stuff that we do is creating change in this industry and in this world. And you're never going to see our logo on it. is the thing, is that we are so behind the scenes and we're not into the vanity metrics and the performative politics. Like, we're not going to be broadcasting like, ooh, this is our win. Like, when we have a win, we'll tell you we have a win, but we're not going to like puff something up that isn't. And we're not out on the front lines doing this work. So much what we do is hidden. So it is hard. It is hard to fundraise. And we've talked about that on other episodes before, that you have to really be engaged with bailing out Benji to be like, ooh, yeah, okay. I see what you did there. And we always love applause in the form of donations. So yeah, send us some love if you feel so inclined, and we rely on small donors. So we get a lot of, you'll send out an email newsletter with some stuff, or we'll make a post about something and we'll get like little like $5 and $10 donations. And to me, that is like, when I see that come through, it is like that little like, hey, I love what you did, $10. We're thrilled. Like, it's great. So just we love our volunteers and our donors. We have a very dedicated group of people that support us, and we're very thankful to them. So.
And our gala should be over.
Yeah.
By the time this airs, we are
celebrating
the recovery.
Oh, celebrating. That's right. I said recovering.
I mean, celebrating it being over and all of that. So we're gonna do a wrap up episode too, but that's what we're excited for. I know our future selves are excited in this moment that this airs, that we are no longer planning a gala.
That's fair. Yeah.
But we hope that you're listening and you attended and had fun. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. We will catch you next week. Bye.
Hi all, I just wanted to pop in with an update. You just listened to us in this episode, hopefully, speculate about what we thought was happening with the Steve Kruse property. Well, I'm here to say that we do have an update. A few days after we actually released this episode, we did go onto the USDA website and saw that a new broker has taken over the Steve Kruse Stonehenge Kennel. And we just wanted to use this as an opportunity to really hit the point of why we don't rush to get information out and why we aren't definitively saying like, hey, Steve Kruse, he's closed just because he has a canceled license. Because we think it's important that we are accurately reporting and using all the information that we have to give transparency to the public. And so that's why I'm here to tell you that sadly, not great news, but it does look like a new licensee is taking over his facility. So far, we do have limited information. There still isn't a solid inspection report on the USDA about this new person and how many dogs are still at the Steve Kruse property, but we are monitoring it every day. There's kind of a 30-day lag between when inspection reports are uploaded, so we are hoping to be able to have more information in the coming weeks. But we do want to let you all know that there is a new licensee at the Steve Kruse Kennel, and we will be monitoring the situation. We can always hope for the best, but please rely on us and have hope in us that we are going to give you the information as it's presented, and we're not going to do it to fit a narrative. We're just giving you the information as it is. So we will keep you updated on this new person, and we're still trying to find a connection. I didn't mention that before, but we're still trying to find a connection to the current licensee. Haven't found anything yet, but please stay tuned, and we will keep you posted.